Daf Lamed Vav Amud Beis, Perek Kira. This perek deals with foods that are cooked. How can we keep them warm on Shabbos? Can we leave them on a stove? Can we return them to the stove? Of course, cooking is a malacha, is an av malacha. Cooking is also midoraisa on Shabbos. But in what manner can we have food that is cooked? How can we keep it hot, retain the heat, etc.? Kira. So kira is, what is a kira? Kira is the type of stove that they had in those days, which was like a box. It was a rectangular box, open at the top, and they used to put the pots either inside of it. The flame, the coals, the fire was at the bottom. They put it either inside or suspended from the top of it. There are other forms of stoves and ovens that they use. There's a kupach, which is a smaller, it's half the size of a kira. A kira has enough room for 2 pots. A kupach has room for only 1 pot. And the halachas are more chomer, more stringent over there because it retains more heat. And then there's a tanur, which is called the oven, which is wider on the bottom, narrower on top. And that retains most heat, and the halachas for a tanur are more the most chomer. But we're dealing now with a kira. So they will see in the Gemara, and we'll go through the Gemara, there's a basic machlokes. If what we're dealing with over here in this Mishnah, are we dealing with allowing foods which are cooked before Shabbos to remain in the stove or remain on the kira during Shabbos, and then they can be removed some point during Shabbos, or are we talking even to put it back and return it and put it back into the kira on Shabbos? So the Gemara will have a lengthy discussion of that and a machlokes on that matter. So we're talking about kira. Kira shesikua. If you had a kira and it was heated up, b'kashu gevava. The kira was the way they made the flame over there, and the way they heated it up was with kash or gevava. The kash, or the straw or the stubble. The kash is the top part of the stalk of it's the straw of the grain. So it's the top part, the part that's closer to the grain. And when you harvest it together with the grain. And the stubble is the part that remains on the ground after the harvest. So you have a kira shesikua b'kash or b'gevava if the way it was heated up was with kash or b'gevava, nice and allowed tavshel. Then you can put the tavshel, again, we'll see, it doesn't mean you can leave the tavshel on it, or you can put it back even on Shabbos. So over there, if it's heated up in that manner, you can, nice and allowed tavshel, you can put a pot that was cooked, the food was cooked, and you want to have it in the kira, you can leave it in the kira, in that type of a kira that was heated up in that manner. But if it was the heated up, the fuel that was used was gefes or eitzim, what's gefes is pulp. So Rashi gives an example of shumshamin, 7 sesame seeds that you had the shumshamin, and after you remove the oil from it, or for instance, if you had olives, after you removed and squeezed out and crushed it and removed the oil, so from the pulp of the sesame seeds or the olive, what remained, that pulp is used for fuel. So if that's the fuel that was used, it was gefes or eitzim or wood, firewood, then lo yitain ad sheyigroif or yitain as efer. There you cannot have it in the kira unless you are garif it, you remove the coals, or you cover it with ash. So we have a concern over here. There's really 2 ways, basic ways of understanding the chilik between the gefes and eitzim and the kash or gevava. Rashi seems to be learning that the kash or gevava will not raise the temperature of the tavshel, the cooked food over there. It won't raise the temperature of it. But by the gefes of eitzim, it could raise and cook it further and raise the intensity of the heat. Other Rishonim learned that that's not the issue at all. The issue is only whether there are coals or not. But in any event, the primary concern is if there are coals remaining, then we're afraid that a person will stoke the fire. He'll stir it in order to increase the intensity of the heat. And if he does that, then he's coming to either Havora, Bishul, he's over the Malacha. So that is an Isser Deraisa. So we have to take measures to be concerned that a person does not stoke the fire. That he does not stoke the fire, he does not increase the flame, he does not cause a Bishul. So we're not concerned by Kashu Gvova, either that it won't increase the heat, the intensity of the heat in any event for the tavshil, or there are no coals present. There are no coals generally over there, so there's not a concern. But by Gefes Ve'etzim, there are coals present, and he could increase the heat intensity of the tavshil. So there we are concerned that if the tavshil, the pot, remains in the kira over there, and it's on the kira or in the kira, that a person might want to have the food cooked up to a higher heat level or cooked faster or improved with the cooking, so he might stoke the flame. He might stir it and therefore increase the fire, cause bishul, so we have to be chayshish and we have to be geyser. So we say that if it's with its kashu gvava, there's not such a concern. But if it's gefes or eitzim, there's a concern, so you have to either remove the coals or cover it with ash. If you remove the coals, then there's no concern. There's no coals over there. If you cover it with ash, then you're showing and indicating that you do not want to stir the coals, you do not want to increase the flame, and it is a reminder, and it shows that you are not, and we know that you're not allowed to be mevashal on Shabbos. Beis Shammai Oimrim Chamer V'lo Tavshil. Now Beis Shammai says, even where we're matir, even what we are matir, we're only matir hot liquids, but not foods. The liquids is less of a concern. The liquids, we're not concerned that he needs less heat to keep it warm. It's not a question of improving with more heat and cooking better and improving it and having it better, more well cooked. Once you have the hot water, then there is not such a need. So therefore, there's less of a concern about being mevashel, stoking the fire, or the way some learn, there's less of appearance of bishul, so we're not that concerned. But by tavshil, where the heat improves the cooked item, and there's a greater need for heat on it, therefore we are concerned. So Beis Shammai says, even where we do allow it, we only allow it for chamin, but not tavshil. Beis Hillel said no, it is permitted. When we allow it for both chamin and for cooked foods. Beis Shammai Oimrim Noitlim V'lo Machzir. Beis Shammai says we only allow you to leave the pot in the kira and then remove it, and to remove it at some point in Shabbos, but not to return it to the kira. Even there, where we allow it, we only allow to leave it there, but not to return it to the kira. Beis Hillel Af Machzirim, Beis Hillel say you are even allowed to put it back into the kira. So the Gemara will now have a lengthy discussion of what does this mean, how to really interpret the Mishnah. Is the heter that we're talking about is to leave it and return it, or in Beis Hillel, or is it only to leave it in the kira? So Gemara has the following shayla: Hai lo yiten lo yachzerhu. When the Mishnah says that kira shesei that if it's begeva says lo yiten, what does that mean? Lo yiten. Does that lo yiten? He can't put it in the kira. What does it mean, lo yitin? Hi, lo yitin, lo yachzir. Does it mean he cannot put it back into the kira? He cannot return it to the kira on Shabbos. Is that what it means? Is it hi, lo yitin, lo yachzir? He can't return it to it. Aval lishayis mashin afal pishena garafena koltum. Or perhaps we would say, and according to this, then the isser would be only to return it. But lahasha, to leave it, if he has the pot there, Erev Shabbos, and he has a pot of the tavshil, according to this, it would mean that he can leave it there even if it's not garav or kotum, even if he hasn't removed the coals, even hasn't covered it with ash. Perhaps that's what it means, that the whole requirement over here to be Garva Kotom, the whole concern over here, and this whole requirement is only if a person wants to put it back into the Kira on Shabbos. But if he's merely leaving it there, Erev Shabbos, and he's just going to leave it there on Shabbos to be removed sometime during the Shabbos, then even if it is with Gefes Eitzim, then there's no requirement of Garva Kotom. Is that what it means? And if that is the case, Umani Chananyahi, and if that is the case, we'd be going according to the sheet of Chananya. Anything that's cooked to the level of Machal ben Drusoy, a food of ben Drusoy. Drusoy was a gangster, so he had to eat on the run. He couldn't wait for his food to be fully cooked. So his food was cooked only to a third of the level of where people would consider it fully cooked. So Hananya says, as long as it's Kimach ben Drusoy, it's considered cooked. It's considered edible, it's considered cooked. Then, as long as you have it to that level, mutar lishoisel gabe kira, you are allowed to leave it in the kira, afal pi shena garv and a kotam, even if it's not garva kotam. So, if that is the pshat, then we'd be saying that kira shesikua, that the kira, the requirement that we have over here to be garva kotam, is only if you want to return it to the kira, if you want to put it back on Shabbos. But just to leave it, merely to leave it there, Erev Shabbos, and to leave it there during the Shabbos, you wouldn't even need to be garva kotam, even if it was heated up, and even if the fuel was gefes eitzim. Is that the pshat? Or perhaps no. Perhaps what our Mishnah means is that lo yitain achi yigrif or achi yiten. So unless it's you say that he's garv or he puts the efer, perhaps that's a requirement even lishais. Perhaps that requirement is even if you want to leave it there, you have to have garv kotam. Or the malicious vi garv kotam. And if not, then not. And certainly you can't return it. But perhaps the requirement to say that it's garfa kotam, that you remove the coals or cover it with ash, is even lishlis. That's the shailam. Well, we have two cases in the Mishnah. Let's bring a raya from the lashon of the Mishnah and to what we're talking about. Because it says, Beis Shammai Oimrim Chamin Avaloi Tashel. Beis Shammai says Chamin, but not Tashel. Only hot liquids, but not a Tashel, not cooked foods. Beis Hillel Oimrim Chamin Vit Tashel. Beis Hillel says, no, both Chamin and Tashel. Beis Shammai Oimrim Neitlin Avaloi Machzir. And Beis Shammai says, Neitlin, you can remove it, meaning, so you can leave it there on the kira and then remove it on Shabbos, avaloi machzirin, but you cannot return it to the kira. Beis Hillel says you can even put it back. Now, if you say whether the Mishnah is talking lishais, that the requirement is even to leave it on the kira. So, then I would understand it as follows. Kira shisiku b'kashav gevava. If you have a kira that was fueled with kashav gevava, with straw and stubble, mashnala tafshel, you can leave the tafshel there. With that kind of fuel, you can leave it there. Nothing has to be done. But the gefes of eitzim, if it's with gefes as the pulp or with firewood, lo yisha, you cannot let it remain. You cannot have it left over there in the kira. Achi yigrif or achi yitain efer, unless you remove the coals or cover it with ash. And what is it that we allow you? What type of items do we allow you to leave on the kira, to leave in the stove, Erev Shabbos, and have it remain there on Shabbos? Beis Shammai says, even there, it's only chamin, but not tavshel. And Cham Beis Hillel says, no, even the tafshel, Cham and Vit tafshel. And then the Seif of the Mishnah would be a continuation, and we would understand. And just like they have the machlekes about what you're allowed to leave on the kira, they have a similar machlekes about returning it, putting it back on the kira on Shabbos. Beis Shammai says that noitlin avoloi machzir. Beis Shammai says you can leave it there, but you cannot put it back. Ubeis Hillel af machzir. And Beis Hillel says once you have it gar of a cotton, you can leave it there. You can leave it there on the kira. So Erev Shabbos, you have it there, you leave it there. It's there, remains in the kira on Shabbos. You can remove it at some time on Shabbos. But if it's gar of a cotton, you can even put it back on the kira. You can even put it back on the kira on Shabbos because the food is already cooked, and we're not afraid he's going to stir the coals because it's gar for cotton, and therefore once it's cooked, putting it back on the kira is not considered cooking again. So it's mutar af machzir. Beis Shammai says you can only remove it, but you can't put it back. Putting it back, we are concerned. Or perhaps it has the appearance of bishul. You can only leave it there, but you can't put it back. So then we would understand. If the Mishnah is saying that even to remain on the kira, it's only if it's gar for cotton, if you took these precautions. Then we understand the two sections of the Mishnah. However, but if you're telling me that the Mishnah is talking lahachzir, meaning to leave it on the kira, you don't even have to be a gar for cotton. If you're just leaving it, if you're simply leaving it there, there's no requirement to be gar for cotton, even if it's fueled with gevus eitz. The whole requirement is only to return it. Well, if that's the case, how do we understand the two sections of the Mishnah? So then we would be understanding the Mishnah to be saying that if it was fueled with kasha ugevava machzir al tafshin, then you can put it back. You can return it to the kira on Shabbos. The gefes veitzim, however, if it was with gefes veitzim, with the pulp or with firewood, lo yachzir, you cannot return it to the kira unless you took the precautions beforehand of removing the coals or covering with ash. And now what is it that you can put back into the kira? They say only liquid, not food. Now Beis Shammai says you can only leave it there, you can't return it. And Beis Hillel says af machzir, you can even return it. Well, why repeat that? According to this approach, that is what the beginning of the Mishnah said. According to this approach, that it's lahachzir tanan, so that is what we started off saying. So the Mishnah started off saying that if you had a big kasha game, machzirin,